Perfect. Well, Robert, I really appreciate you joining me here to chat about your debut film, Stop Motion. So I wanted to know, Robert, what inspired you to write this particular story and what possessed you to present it in such a unique, subversive way?
I mean, I am a stop motion animator, so that gets us quite far with the answer. I mean, my background is in stop motion animation. I've made a lot of stop motion animation films. Um, I always thought it'd be interesting to make a film about a stop motion animator, because I've never seen that before. I've never seen that like depicted as a vocation that people do, as in a narrative before. So I thought that would be an interesting character, and to sort of graft that onto a kind of archetypal sort of tortured artist narrative. That was like the kind of the beginning of the film. And so it was very natural as the story developed that it would be about somebody whose creation is sort of taking on a life of its own. And so that from there, it's a short leap to, doing the technical thing of mixing the stop motion animation elements with the live action elements in a kind of nightmarish way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it works so well. And to touch on, of course, your background as a stop motion filmmaker, I thought it was really cool. It was a really nice touch to see that you actually cameoed a short film of your own in this film. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that one was called Billy, yeah?
Bobby, yeah.
Or Bobby, yeah, sorry.
I don't think I cameoed Bobby. Yeah, there's a little clip of a short film I made called Channel X Cartoon Show, the film, and there's a puppet that makes a cameo in the film that is the puppet that was in my student film many years ago. Makes a cameo. He's the kind of like sort of grimy looking guy who climbs out the box and sits on the sofa later on in the film. That was like a cameo of sort of the character from one of my short films. But I don't think Bobby makes an appearance in it though.
Perfect. And I know I mean, I think anyways, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong here, but I felt that you could have maybe just as easily, if not much easier, certainly could have costumed up some talented performance actors and put them in front of a green screen to make it look like they came from a stop motion tabletop set. So I have to ask you, what did you find were maybe some of those unique challenges, and alternatively, perhaps some of the advantages that you found in infusing stop motion methods into your live action film the way that you ultimately did it?
Well, I think if you're going to make a film called Stop Motion and it's about a stop motion animator, it's just cheating.
Absolutely.
The cheat, you don't want to cheat the stop motion stuff. I mean, there's no CGI in the film; it's all stop motion animation. And but stop motion, even if you're not mixing stop motion animation with live action together in the same frame, as we did sometimes, it's still challenging just because it takes so long and it's such intricate work. You are moving the character a tiny little bit frame by frame, and then 20 every 24 little movements you have 1 second to film. So it's a very different rhythm to making a live action film. So having parallel shoots going on, which is kind of how we did some aspects of the film. Whenever there's animation stuff interacting with live action, we were kind of shooting that stuff at the same time. So that's a very different rhythm. That's quite challenging. We would shoot the live action scene, and then we had a replica scene that was an animation set where the animators would then animate the character, and those two shots were then sort of composited together. So there's a lot of very boring technical working out and light matching and stuff that you have to do in order to make those shots come off. So they were very carefully storyboarded. They're just technically challenging,
And considering the added time, of course, that it does take to pull off the stop motion aspects of it, I could imagine that would be enough to make any producer maybe a little bit nervous as well. Did you find that challenging to sort of get it all in the can, so to speak, actually within budget? I would imagine there was a ton of preparation to convince producers that it wasn't going to take you 30 years to make this film.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of, the sort of the unique selling point, if you like, of the film is that it is about stop motion and it mixes stop motion animation with live action. It's actually what the producers were attracted to. So that wasn't a problem. I think there were just logistical things we have to work out with just the reality of getting the film made on time, where We have to figure out, how to. I mean, it's exactly what you say. It's just an awful lot of planning, very meticulous planning to make sure everything was executed, on time. But there were two phases as well to the animation. There was the stuff where where there's animation characters interacting with live action. That was a separate thing. And then there's like the film within the film. So there's the stuff where whenever we see, the characters looking at something that's on a laptop screen, that was like a separate shoot. That's just pure stop motion. So I did those scenes myself after the main shoot while we were editing. And then we could drop those into the edit as we were doing them. So it's sort of, there was two phases to the stop motion shoot.
Yeah, and it's when I watched the film too, it might be a bit of a crass reference, but I couldn't help but think in many ways this is almost, as far as the infusion aspects of the film goes, it was kind of like a Roger Rabbit from hell, where they had both working seamlessly side by side with each other. So it was almost hard to...
I love that. Roger Rabbit from hell. That's a good... should have put that on the poster.
There you go. While I do assure you as well, Robert, that I watched this film almost 100% completely sober, it really felt like I was being led on, a psychedelic journey and some kind of very strange depths of existence. And I found that between the scenes that fluctuated, between being intensely frenetic and maddeningly stretched out, I find myself, I was really forced to question whether what I was witnessing was actually what was happening to your characters, or if it was just a fabrication of an unstable state of mind. I kept guessing where the reality of that insanity started and ending throughout. Now, assuming that that was your intention, what methods did you employ to ensure that that was a deliberate viewer response?
Yeah, it came down to it was there in the script. It was an intention in the script, so that you are positioned within exactly the same psychological space as the character is, and so what the character knows, and so that's a really good guide, for us as filmmakers, that to say, well, the main character doesn't necessarily know what's real and what's not, and so you don't necessarily know what's real and what's not. And then when we were editing, after we shot the film and when we were editing, we pushed that further. So we actually removed information from the edit. There's stuff that we shot that we took out because it was explaining things a bit too much. So we deliberately took things out. So there are more ellipses. It's a bit more abstract. There are more things that you have to try and work out for yourself rather than being sort of spoon-fed too much. So it was an organic process, and we just dared to go further and further as we were editing and testing the film when we were watching it back.
Great. Yeah, I thought it definitely came off as almost a bit of the unreliable narrator, except it was sort of my subconscious trying to put all these pieces together that became the unreliable narrator throughout. And I thought that worked really well. Just the entire process of it as a viewer was very unsettling.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I did find as well that at the core of the film, Ella, who, of course, was played brilliantly by Aisling Franciosi, was clearly trying to battle, the demons of a life that was somewhat choked off and overshadowed by her overbearing perfectionist mother, by creating monsters that she might understand, and certainly through her monsters might actually find a life, which was all of her own. So, Robert, considering, how well you nailed that poignant aspect of the film, I'd love it if you could share what might have inspired your depiction of such a balancing act, because it certainly came across as a very personal story to be told through both Ella's perspective and perhaps yours as the director and writer of this.
I mean, the aside from the impulse to make a film about a stop motion animator, the other thing that that really inspired this film was experiences I've had when I've been making my own short films, where I had the sensation that the film itself took on a life of its own, and that's not true of necessarily only true of stop motion films. It's true of any art form, whether it be writing or if you're doing a painting or you're making music or whatever it is. If you're in a kind of creative sort of zone, there comes a moment where the thing that you're working on seems to take on a life of its own, and you're no longer telling it what to do. It starts telling you. It starts talking back to you, and it starts telling you what it wants to be. And I've had that experience, and that was that was the other element that fed into the story of stop motion, was that it's about somebody who feels creatively sort of suppressed by their environment that they grew up in with her mother. But then when her mother's out of the picture, she suddenly discovers her own creativity. But that creativity has a life of its own. She's not necessarily in control of it. It has its own agenda. And the idea was, which excited us, Robin and I, who I wrote the script with, the idea of the monster in the film is Ella's creativity in a way. It has its own consciousness and its own inner life.
That it certainly does become a bit of a blessing and a curse. She certainly gets what she bargains for, but in a much more intense, darker way than she anticipated.
Yeah,
much to the delight of us as the viewer, of course. And speaking of mentioned, of course, collaboration with the co-writer Robert. Would you be able to walk us through the process of collaborating as well with your makeup and effects and creature designer Dan Martin? And then maybe how you came about bringing Ella's Ashman world to very grotesque life. I thought the work he did was brilliant to work with the story that you needed him to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I like Dan's work because he's very good with practical effects. He's very inventive with sometimes quite minimalist basic materials. So he's very creative. He's one of those guys that can make something out of a tube and a bit of Vaseline or something. He just kind of conjures something up. And I like the handmade quality of what he does. So he was the guy I wanted to go to. And I had a mutual friend, and Dan had already seen my films, and so we could talk about that. And he liked the script, and yeah, I mean, it was like when we were sort of discussing it, it was really important to me that, and one of the reasons I wanted to work with Dan is that the puppets and the horror stuff in it is quite rough around the edges. It's not very slick. It's a bit crude because that's how she's made them. They're crudely made. I just happen to have this little
cool
here. So that is the puppet that we used, and it's a little bit split here and there from all the performance, but it's crude, messy, and there was a lot of back and forth between us about making it feel, to use the word, a bit crap. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Like it shouldn't be too good. It had to be a bit rough and a bit handmade by someone who's a little bit, because all of the horror, all of the elements in the film come from Ella. She's made them all.
Right.
So it has to be like, what would that character make in these semi blackouts that she has?
Yeah, and it was almost an imperfect perfection in a sense, I thought too, because of course Ella's a big contention that her mother certainly had with her is, kind of, why won't you listen? Why don't you just do it this way, make everything absolutely perfect? And no matter how hard Ella tried, she just couldn't quite please her mother. And it seemed that even with her mother gone and her imagination ultimately taken over, with that, like you said, with that crudeness and that almost stilted movements and mannerisms of, the beautiful doll that you just showed us and the scenery, it was almost like no matter how hard Ella tried to get this amazing story across, there was nothing perfect or smooth about it. And it seemed that even in the afterlife, so to speak, her mother's shadow was still very much present in her creation. And I thought that, I don't know if that was intentional, but that certainly came across that way.
Yeah.
And I know, now, is it fair to say as well that throughout your history of stop motion making as well, that, I mean, this is such an ambitious story that I got the impression that, it was such an intricate story, so many parts falling into place, that this was a script that perhaps you had spent quite a bit of time working on before it was ready to present in the form of a film. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it took quite a long time. We did many drafts of the script. It took a long time to get the right balance between the elements, and to get the right balance between the character as well, to make sure she was driven and flawed, and she's quite selfish in some ways. She's not the nicest person. She's very self-centered. She's very self-obsessed with her work, but at the same time, she's not an unpleasant person that you don't want to watch. And that was always a delicate balance to get right. A lot of that's down to Aisling's performance as well, that she got that balance right. But that took a long time to get that right, and to contain all of the elements in a way that felt balanced, because there's a lot of stuff in it. So it took a while to get that, but we carried on refining that even through the edit. We were still playing around and rearranging things in the edit, because once you shoot your script, then when you edit it, it doesn't always come out how it's written. It has its own life, and you have to kind of resculpt it as well to make so that you're translating it into images. So it went through another iteration as we were editing as well. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, it was a long process to get that right. It took years.
Okay. Well, your all the years paid off, because it looked like it came across exactly the way that it needed to. And one thing that I loved about the film too, Robert, is that even though you had a lot of actors, many of which, at least according to IMDb, which I know isn't always the most accurate, looks like a lot of the actors didn't really have a huge list of, at least in film credits, which blew me away, because everybody seemed, their chemistry worked really, really well, and everybody seemed to bounce off each other really well. There was never a scene that it felt like two folks were just simply were working as opposed to bringing their scene to life. In particular, I thought, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Caoilinn Springall, and of course plays a little girl whose name is never really revealed, was absolutely brilliant in her role of course, inspiring Ella's nightmare feel with some really spooky vibes of her own. And I was really surprised to see, Caoilinn in particular, with so few film credits, given the outstanding performance in the film, considering that a lot of the scenes that she has that are certainly very viscerally horrific, that her characters are part of, were there any certain accommodations or, maybe considerations to bring out the best in her scenes without scarring the poor girl for life?
I think firstly, probably her lack of credits is just purely down to her age, because she's very, very young.
Sure.
She had done a couple of things, but when I spoke to her on a Zoom call, and I just loved her. I loved her personality. I loved the way that she said the lines. I loved the fact that she had this mix of being very, very sweet, but at the same time, there was just a little bit. She could stare at you a little bit that could be a little bit unnerving, and I like that combination. And she's just a total professional. Really, really, like, I mean, I didn't really have to say that much to her. She was just very, very good. She understood when we talked about the character. She understood who the character was and what she was. And then, but so I thought she was straight away. When we were doing some little rehearsals with her and Aisling, I just thought straight away she was great. Aisling actually said to me, "Wow, I've got to up my game." She was so impressed with Caoilinn. Yeah, I think she's brilliant in the film. And to answer the second part of your question, yeah, I mean, we were very conscious of the fact that the film's got some very dark things in it. So the strategy was really that, we would introduce her. If there's stuff in the scene that was going to be in the same scene as her that was a bit kind of creepy, I would just make sure I showed it to her beforehand, show her it's made of rubber. Maybe one of the special effects guys could come in and explain it, and so she could play with it and touch it and stuff. So there's no surprises, so that when we start rolling, she knows exactly what it is, and it's just make believe. And she was totally cool. She loved all that stuff.
That's
she's really cool about it.
Yeah, because I know when I was watching some of the scenes, certainly, I mean, it just starts at level 5 almost immediately, and then just ratchets up past 10, and I'm thinking, oh no, they didn't just go there. So I can only imagine what maybe she must have thought of, because of course, as I'm watching this, she's in the scenes, and I'm thinking, this poor girl. I wanted to give her a hug, but a cautious hug, because she also looked like there wasn't something quite right with her either. So, and I know, kind of to bounce off my own question a little bit too, Robert, regarding the on-screen chemistry, I found certainly in particular, between Aisling and Caoilinn, that their chemistry was palpable. Can you maybe talk a little bit about maybe what some of their preparation looked like off camera, what you perhaps attribute to them working off of each other so well, especially when that horror was cranked up well past 10?
I mean, it just happened organically. Like, they're both just very nice, open, chatty people. Neither of them are shy. Neither of them are are have any bullshit around them. They just kind of both showed up and just was really cool, keen, liked hanging out, chatted. Caoilinn was always around making small talk and sort of just being funny and and sort of just having a laugh. And Aisling's very light compared to her performance in the film. She's just a very lovely, light-hearted person. So the vibe on the set was very upbeat and very, very relaxed, and just sort of everyone got on. It was just a really nice set. So it's part of the atmosphere of the entire set. Everyone was really cool, really nice people. And, they had a little bit of time to rehearse together. So I think they got to know each other a little bit that way. But yeah, it just all happened very organically and naturally,
Yeah, and organic, I think, is a great, if you had to choose one blanket statement for your film other than horrific, organic is definitely there as well, which I think added to the horrific elements as well. It's like, I can't believe these things are happening to these poor innocent people because I can relate to them so well. And as a bit of, I guess, a bonus question for future fans of this film, if you will, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, are we ever going to see a final version of the Ashman film that Ella worked so bloody hard on through the entire thing? Is that going to happen? Because it was almost like a film within a film, and I loved it. Of course, we got to see the end of your film, but not quite the end of the film that Ella was working on.
Yeah, I hate to disappoint you, but I don't know if we will actually. I think there's a few little bits and pieces that will kind of hit the editing room floor, but with animation, you basically shoot what you need. You don't spend months and months shooting stuff that that's not going to be in the film. So what you see is what you get.
I can appreciate that. I'm a big nerd when it comes to special features, so I had some fingers crossed on that. And all right, I'm going to ask to see if but I kind of expected that answer, but thank you. Now, finally, I guess to kind of gear towards wrapping up this awesome conversation with you, Robert. And again, I really, really appreciate your time with us. When lights on the theater, when they do come back on and your audience is digesting what they just bore witness to, what reactions or responses to your film will you mark the success of your film by? What is it that you're really hoping that people are going to walk away reminiscent about with this particular film?
Whenever I go and see a film, my favorite thing to experience is to be surprised and kind of a bit stunned, and maybe to not have fully understood everything I've seen, but for it to feel like it's spoken to me on a kind of a deep level. And my favorite thing, which is the thing I would most, love if this was to happen, and a few people have said to me it has happened, is that it kind of stays with them and haunts them, So like, I love that. If I watch a film and like a couple of weeks later, it's still rattling around in my brain, and I'm still it bothers me, or I just kind of feel haunted by it. The images in it or the sounds in it, and it's seeped under my skin, and it now inhabits me. Because a lot of films, I go and see them and then they end, and then it's like, okay, that was over, and then I don't think of it again. Sure. So I like films that kind of like don't quite end, and they carry on living inside you afterwards. That would be my hope for this film.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good attainable hope to aim for on this one. I know certainly when I saw the screener, I thought of several friends that I can't wait to go and take them to see it on the big screen as well, just so I've got somebody that I can talk about this thing, as opposed to just sort of sitting there and digesting all of this and reflecting back on it on my own, to see what other people think about that, to see if they shared in that haunting aspect that you mentioned. I think
and also I think it's good for a film to not give you all of its answers. Mm-hmm. That you have to debate and you have to figure it out, and maybe you don't quite understand, or you don't quite know what that meant, or there's stuff in there that you do go talk about with your friends. I always like that as well. There's some images in there that are deliberately ambiguous. I'm sure when you watch the film again, I mean, the very first image of the film is quite an ambiguous image, but it's yeah, and I like that as well. I like the fact that for me it has a meaning, but I like not explaining that and letting people be haunted by it and figure it out, hopefully to be haunted by it, and then to try and piece it together afterwards. And yeah,
Yeah, and then I think that's the reward that we get when we do come across a movie like that. I know, I mean, I'm chewing on my tongue right now because there's a burning question I want to ask you, but I don't want to do that because I know it'd be a major spoiler potentially. But there's certainly some aspects, some scenes in the film, we'll say, or some things that we can see that, as I alluded to earlier, really made me question, these things really just happen? Is this sort of, a figment of Alla's messed up, slowly deteriorating mind at work, or are these things that are actually happening to her, or certainly just happening internally that she's fighting with? And I thought that unsettledness is in that ambiguity with that unsettledness worked really, really well, and that's definitely what stuck with me as as a viewer, and even as I'm talking about to you about this film, it's all coming back again. I'm thinking, man, I need to watch this film again. I'm gonna wait till I see it again on the big screen so I can watch it with some friends and we can talk about it. But I want to know what I think upon more reflection of.
Good, yeah.
Did I just really see that, or did it happen? And so I thought it was brilliant.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again for all of your time and your insight on this. I very much hope that we get to see more infusion films from you in the future, and that your stop motion days are hardly behind you, but simply just beginning with even more great things to enjoy from you down the road, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.